We've talked a lot in previous videos about A players, but what does that even mean? Because maybe that's a phrase that rankles somewhat because it conjures up images of people who, whilst they have been truly successful, it might not necessarily always be the nicest people. Jack Welch, for example, is often lauded as being extraordinary in his own business acumen, but some of his business practices around the way that he treated people, cutting the bottom 10% of the workforce, as in the C players, if you will, seems a bit brutal. Steve Jobs, similarly, a challenging individual, by all metrics, an extraordinarily successful man, but his insistence that there were two types of people, A players and bozos, again seems a little bit harsh and lacking in humanity. I'm sure that most of us would not want to be thought of as a bozo. But there is something in this, that there are certain A-player characteristics that help to set somebody up to be consistently successful in a way that goes way beyond what you would expect simply from somebody's technical competency for a particular role, or their past experience, or the past results that they might have delivered in other colourably similar types of roles. And those attributes tend to come back to their mindset and resilience. So if you've ever read Mindset by Carol Dweck, you'll be familiar with the concept of the growth mindset, which actually has a real meaning. It's not just some simple kind of throwaway phrase. The growth mindset is one where really the person looks at things with a level of opportunity. There's always, no matter how bleak things seem, there's always a seed of opportunity to learn or to see something different to other people. Talent is not a full stop, it's the beginning of a sentence. It's the ability to have a foundation upon which you can build rather than something that is God-given, if you like. So it is basically seeing yourself as a work in progress, always. You're never the finished article. And interestingly, you can have a growth mindset on one thing, but a fixed mindset on something else. So you might have a very closed down view of something like that you just believe to be fundamental about people, but then you might have a very open growth mindset on something else. So it's quite a complex, nuanced area. It's definitely not one thing. Resilience, which is this ability to bounce back, this ability to learn from mistakes and to not take them too personally, is also a fundamental aspect of it. So looking at those two things, growth mindset and resilience, there's something that underpins both of them. And in the 1940s and 50s, there was a guy called Carl Rogers who he was a humanistic psychologist and the father of what's called client-centered therapy or person-centered counselling. And he talked about this concept of having a locus of evaluation. Now, when he was talking about it, he was talking about the therapeutic relationship. So he was talking about having a counsellor who tries to get into the same mindset as the client or patient, but client was usually the word that was used. And to see the world and to see them as they see themselves, thereby placing themselves in a way that helps them to kind of self-direct and to I suppose, just self-discover what the potential solutions might be. However, going deeper than that, there's also an element of having a locus of evaluation in your own mind. So we all have this, and it's pretty profound, the difference that it makes if you have an internal locus of evaluation for your own self-esteem and your own self-image versus an external locus of evaluation for your self-esteem and your self-image. So what do I mean by that? Well, what are the things that are external to you? It could be your position in the community, it could be your position in an organisation, it could be a role that you're playing at any given time, be it mother or father or brother or sister or husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or son or daughter or whatever. You know, these are all roles. And you tend to find that you've got multiple different roles that you could be playing at any given time. But your performance in any role is always going to be conditional. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a bunch of things, most of which are beyond your control, that can affect how well you do or do not perform in any given role at any given time. You know, did you get enough sleep last night? That could affect your competency in a role. How experienced are you in this particular role right now? Have you done it before? How are you feeling? Is there something else going on in your life right now that's distracting you, not allowing you to focus? All of these things will affect your role performance, and therefore role performance is always conditional. And whilst you might perform at 100%, you also might not. Now, if you purely evaluate yourself and your self-image is based entirely on the foundation of I am my role, I am what I do, that's a really unhealthy place to build your self-image, because those foundations, being conditional, are always going to be pretty shaky. And it means that when something goes wrong in your role, you're more likely to take it personally. You're less likely to look at it objectively, and therefore less likely to be able to bounce back quickly and learn the lessons that failure is trying to teach you. So if you have an internal locus of evaluation, then you've built your sense of self-image on things that are more fundamental. Your beliefs, your values, how those values are translated into behaviours so that they become not just values, which are typically kind of aspirational, but also virtues, which are much more, well, basically like they become baked into your character. The way you see yourself, the kind of person you believe you are and that you ought to be. These are much, much healthier, less conditional criteria upon which you can build your sense of self. Now, if you have that kind of a locus of evaluation, then you are much more able to learn from failure. You're much less likely to internalize it and take it personally. It's not, I'm a bad person, it's, I did that thing badly. It's not, I have shame about this, which is very much a personal characteristic, and you know, I'm ashamed because I deeply take it into myself. I can feel guilty, but guilt is behavioural. That's something that you can learn from. There's a big difference between guilt and shame. I'm going to give you a little example to illustrate now. Got my wallet here, and I'm pretty sure that I do still have some folding money, and I do indeed, an actual £10 note. And these things are plastic these days, but if you take this into a shop, it's worth £10. If you crumple it up and throw it on the floor, doesn't affect its value. Smooth it out, take it into a shop, it's still worth £10. You can stamp on it, you can tread it on it, you can put it in a muddy puddle. Fundamentally, it's still worth £10. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. It will always have that intrinsic worth. That is its value. But if I attempt to do something different with it, if I fold it as much as one can fold these things, given that they're now plastic, these notes, and I fold it to make a rudimentary paper aeroplane, it now has a new role. Its new role is that of aeroplane. Now, if you're going to rate its performance and its effectiveness as an aeroplane on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being abysmal and 10 being I'm getting a phone call from Boeing because they want to buy the design rights, Well, let's just test it, shall we, as to how well it performs on its maiden voyage. I mean, it's kind of crashed and burned. It's even sort of unfurled mid-flight. I don't think I'm getting any phone calls from Boeing anytime soon. In fact, if I was being terribly kind, I'd probably rate that 2, maybe 3 at maximum out of 10. But I unfurl it, I take it back into a shop, it's still worth £10. So core value, intrinsic value, internal locus of evaluation, 10 out of 10, always. Performance in its role, 3 maximum. But because it's got that internal value, if this was a person, it would be able to look at its performance somewhat objectively and say, well, next time I need to fold it differently. Maybe I need to use some additional aids, such as sellotape or something like that, to make sure that it doesn't unfurl mid-flight. And through that feedback, it can actually start to learn how to perform better in the role. But it's only because it has an intrinsic value, or you have an intrinsic value and an intrinsic sense of your core value, that you're able to learn. So that ability to bounce back, that resilience, that ability to learn from failure, that growth mindset is deeply, deeply facilitated by the foundation stones of your self-evaluation. And that is a really fundamental lesson for personal development. Hope that's helpful.